gentle marketers. Happy New Year, and welcome to Season 9 and Episode 67 of the Gentle Business Revolution podcast, the show where we talk about marketing your business by disrupting the current marketing paradigm and changing it to a gentler approach, one that's based on empathy and kindness. I'm still Sarah Senecroce, even in 2021, your host, and you know that you're in the right place if you are a heart-centered entrepreneur or change maker who is looking for a different, a better way to market your business. Or you might also be a marketing impact pioneer, so that's someone who's working in an organization who really sees that there is opportunity to do marketing differently. I am so delighted to start this new year with a very special episode. If you're a regular here, you know that I'm organizing the conversations around the 7 Ps of the Gentle Marketing Mandala. If you're new here, welcome. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you can download your one-page marketing plan with the Gentle Marketing version of the 7 Ps of marketing at sarahsenecroce.com/one page. That's the number 1 and then page. It comes with 7 email prompts to really help you reflect on these different Ps. So today's conversation, I honestly didn't know exactly where to fit it in, under which P, because it could really fit anywhere. But it seemed so timely to schedule it on the very first day of this new year or this new era. In episode 66 last year, I talked about a gentle business outlook for 2021. If you missed it, it's sarahsenecroce.com/GBR66. And part of that new way of doing business is really about trusting your intuition. Penny Pierce, a clairvoyant and previous guest on this show, calls what's coming the intuitive age. By the way, we did a great series of episodes with Penny around this new intuitive age. And so you can check that out at sarahsenecroce.com/Penny. That's PENNEY. So sarahsenecroce/Penny. So starting off this new year with a conversation around coincidences and serendipity felt really good. And I have Tracey Dobbins join me for this lovely chat. Our meeting is actually one of those coincidences itself, of course. So she'll share that story with you. But let me tell you a bit more about Tracey. Born in England and currently living in the beautiful, expansive middle of the US, Tracey considers herself an adult white child, endlessly in love with questions. She almost pursued her love of psychology in college in her 20s, but the art muse spoke louder. 30 years later, after a very successful international art career, a series of serendipitous events occurred. This led her back to the other true love of her life, human nature, and she became an ICF-certified positive psychology coach. She delights in asking and answering big questions that all begin with small talk. In 2018, she founded Master Small Talk to help contemplative businesswomen navigate our extroverted business world by developing their most powerful networking asset, their aligned intuitive voice. Over the years, she began an informal study by asking receptive people she met her favorite cocktail party question: what's your dictionary definition of a coincidence? The responses seemed to fit under 5 main umbrellas. People either felt challenged or drawn like moths to a flame. Heady conversations invite us to step outside of our comfort zone and momentarily grow together. Research now shows that being curious triggers a part of the brain that is related to reward processing. So for some people, it actually feels good to wander. In our exploration together, we covered Tracey's moment of awakening that made her forever curious, the 5 different camps of how people define coincidence, the role of intuition in business, the role of beautiful questions like these, a few of our own serendipity stories, and much more. So without further ado, let's dive in. Hi, Tracey. How are you?
I am so well, Sarah. I am just delighted to be here.
It's wonderful. Yeah, me too. I'm so excited for this pretty unusual conversation. It's not like I talk about coincidences and serendipity every day. And it's like, well, how does that fit into business? But we'll make it fit. So I look forward to our conversation. So
Oh,
why
me too.
don't we start out by sharing how we met on LinkedIn? Remember that kind of back and forth we had about Capri, and yeah,
Yeah.
why don't you start there?
Well, I've just noticed that if several things seem to pop up in my life, quite often if they involve particular people, I feel somewhat compelled to let them know. And that's kind of exactly what happened between us. I had received your Saturday newsletter, which is always a joy. You pop into my inbox, and
Thank
I love that on Saturday mornings. And you were talking about your vacation in Capri, and I thought, oh gosh, such an exotic place, and a place that I'd kind of been aware of, but the day before that, I had planned to order some new perfume that I had recently tried, and the name of it is Capri. And so when your email popped up, I thought, oh, okay, Capri twice. That's kind of fun. And then the next day, I was on a conference call with somebody, and this lady said, yeah, she says, I just want to get through this whole COVID thing because I've been really wanting to, take my mother to Capri. I'm thinking, okay. There's three times this has popped up. I bet Sarah will find this interesting. So I reached out to you, and I thought, if anyone finds this curious, it'll be you. But I just felt like I needed to let you know that you were part of this serendipitous event, and I wasn't, and perhaps am still not quite sure what the intention is for it, but I just found it quite statistically interesting that this word Capri was linking me with a lady in a class that I was doing on a call, and also with you. And we met a little bit earlier on, but I thought that was kind of noteworthy, and I just wanted to share that with you.
Yeah, I love that story so much when you reached out to me. And then it made me think of at least, two other stories that I then shared with you. And I can share one a bit later on. But I would like you to kind of start telling listeners, a little bit about who you are. And there's one particular story that I also wrote down. It has to do with this telescope of your dad. So tell us who you are and, a bit of your story, and then the telescope.
Well, I just to sort of add on to the Capri story, after we, did sort of a first conversation together, you had mentioned the cover of your book, the new book that's coming. And when you mentioned it and you described it to me, I actually envisioned a symbol that was both, female as well as male, because you were kind of wondering about the cover. And I envisioned this and I mentioned it. And then after we stopped talking, a version of that symbol showed up in my LinkedIn feed, like 10 minutes later.
That's right.
I thought, that's pretty wild. And I screenshot it and I sent it to you, because that's the kind of serendipity that I think everybody can have and be part of if they take the time to notice. Right. I mean, to actually notice what's going on around, because you have to be conscious and present in the now in order to pick up on these things. So you're not focused on the past, and you're not constantly focusing on, sort of what's coming up in a future tense. You're open and receptive to what is now, what is present. And I think that alerts us. We start recognizing patterns of words or images that perhaps have some particular meaning to us. Yeah. So what I noticed back, when I was 8 years old, I had an experience that I can recall it as though it was yesterday. It was that vivid. My stepfather rented a telescope from our local university. And he was getting sort of interested in astrology, and he was very interested in the arts. So I was aware of the encouragement of, be curious, be expressive, don't limit yourself, right? Don't limit yourself. And so he rented this telescope, and he got me up at 3 a.m. And I went outside onto the grass, and I looked up at the moon. And it was a big telescope, so I saw the craters on the moon.
Wow.
And it, without a doubt, Sarah, it's true to this day. It's the most powerful memory that I've ever had. And I mean, that was 50 years ago. And it literally woke me up. It really did. My consciousness was trying to grasp from this place I was standing on the grass to this immense space between me and this other world. I was looking at another world, and it almost like knocked me over. I was just so blown away with the scale. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep after that. I literally felt like I'd come into being. I'd had an awakening. And it was just humbling. It was just such an awe-inspiring acknowledgement of how small we really are in the big picture and all the different things that our big picture entails. Mm-hmm. So that truly is one of my favorite, most personal memories. And, maybe others have had something like that where you suddenly are realizing, wow, I am a very small part of something so big I can hardly wrap my head around it.
You think this living this story had an impact or an influence on how you lived in this world that's 3D, but oftentimes it's more than 3D. And so these little magical moments, maybe you were more aware to them because you had already lived some kind of magical moment back then.
I definitely think it woke me up. It made me started to think very outwardly, being conscious of, kind of being more the receiver and noticing what was going on around me. I wasn't taking things for granted. I was taking the time to notice.
Right.
This experience just really woke me up. And I think it truly did change me. And I think it changed me for the better.
Mm-hmm.
But
so how did it influence or how do you think that what you lived through in this moment kind of, made you in the person that you are today, and maybe also the work that you're doing today? How are these events related?
I think it made me curious beyond belief. It made me, suddenly my world wasn't just the little place I lived or my block, right, or my little town. It was, holy cow, that is I'm looking at the universe. I am looking at something, the scale of which I can't even fathom, and to not take things for granted, and to realize that the perspective and just this enormity. There's just so many clues and things that are little tethers of either stories or moments, or they're things to be explored. It really pushed my curiosity button, and it made me live with those glasses. Everything became even more curious. And I think I kind of define myself as an adult why child. Some children, I think you said one of your sons is the kind that always asks why. Mm-hmm. We always want to know why. We always want to get to the seed of something. Mm-hmm. And that just, sort of propelled what I was already kind of predisposed to. I was always just the why child. And it was almost as if it's unending. I've seen something so big that I can never get to the end of it. I'm always going to be asking why, and truly being curious about everything, everyone, questioning everything. That just made my world so much richer, so much more vibrant.
Right. Yeah, these questions, they make me think of, the first thing you told me in our LinkedIn messaging exchange is that you said, yeah, I use this question, what's the definition of a coincidence, over and over again. So you approached people and just asked them, what's your definition of a coincidence? How do you define it? That's kind of this curiosity. I think it's like, well, I want to know. So you just approach people and ask them that, right?
I thought it was just one of the most fascinating questions, because once I started becoming more curious, I started noticing coincidences. I started noticing things when I would think, what are the odds that this is happening? This is just so strange. Maybe I need to take notice of this. So I began to get more curious when I noticed these coincidences. And naturally, I started asking other people, were they equally interested and curious? So it got to kind of be a default question when I was, meeting new people. And it's perhaps not a question for everybody, because some linear people are like, I don't understand that. It's not native thinking, perhaps, to a very linear thinker, but creative people and big thinkers were just like thirsty for these kinds of questions that are bottomless. I mean, you literally could exchange for hours on a topic, or something happened. So I was trying to find out, how did they define this? I still didn't really know how I was defining it. And through hearing other people and hearing, their explanation, it was something I could kind of build on myself.
So I'm curious what they said, because I know, for example, my husband, he would just say, oh, that's just a coincidence. That's just the odds mean that this happened, and there's nothing magical to it. It's just, that's the way it is. So I'm curious what you learned from what other people said, what their definition was.
Well, I was so intrigued by this. I started keeping a journal of it. And so I was, keeping track and trying to, figure out, okay, what might this person think of the question? And as humans, we're always looking, I think, to interpret and make meaning of our world through patterns and through connections. And I kind of boiled it down to 5 camps of thought that these interpretations or perspectives could fall under. And the first one, I would call this basically, coincidences are part of a predetermined plan that is unique to each of us. So it's fatalism. It's suggesting that all events will happen in an exact manner of a bigger predetermined plan. So some of the comments that I got that I kind of put under that thought umbrella is, I personally don't believe in coincidence. I feel everything happens for a reason, and it was meant to be, and it's predetermined by a higher force. Mm-hmm. I know another person said, not sure I believe in pure coincidences. The world is way more organized and intentional than that. I would say I believe in a divine plan, or a roadmap, if you will, that we all have, and that we all intersect when the time is right and it's appropriate. So another person said, well, I call them a God incident, especially when it's something that is obviously spiritual in its nature. Now, another lady said to me, having a deep faith in God, I see coincidences at God incidences. Okay, well, there's a coincidence right there. Right? They're both creating a new word or a new definition. They're calling it a God incidence. Things happen that can't be explained by any other way except by God's hand being in it. So that's kind of the first camp where there's a predetermined aspect.
Right.
Now, the second camp is one that perhaps your husband would feel more aligned with, and that's the mathematical explanation.
Right.
And that takes into account the statistical laws of probability and a fundamental rule of marginal possibilities. So if you think from just the sheer vastness of so many things going on around us, literally every nanosecond of time, it means statistically things will logically fall into place, and there's going to be coincidences, because it's basically a law of odds and probability. So if I were to ask that question of, a mathematical mind, they're going to try to break it down into the coincidental event into micro precursors that can attribute an actual numerical probability factor to each piece of these. So they're trying to quantify the odds and prove that it's less random, right? Because now you can say there's cause and effect logic. So that's kind of the linear mathematical approach to that question. And then there's a third camp, which I call sort of electromagnetic energy attraction, meaning that, we attract things that match our own magnetic wavelength. So it's kind of like a polarity theory, which is perhaps what a lot of law of attraction is framed around, right? We attract the same vibration that we emit. Right. So negative is going to attract negative, positive naturally would attract positive. So some of the comments that I got under that umbrella, I don't actually believe in coincidences, because I think that we live in a vibrational universe, and I no longer acknowledge them as coincidences. And another said, when there's a strong enough connection to things, thoughts can relay telepathically. As some people are better to receive and awareness than other people, but because of that, we're all connected, and that we are connected with every other living thing, and that's the tie that binds us. So another person said, vibrations, literally from our own cells and organs, produce a unique frequency, kind of like a fingerprint. And consequently, when we're out of that internal energy alignment, we incur disease, or we incur depression, we incur problems because our frequency isn't radiating properly. And it's, maybe this is how we're connected over time and space. Again, what people call telepathy, because we're tethered and connected to a similar wave signature.
I can think of a few instances where I, thinking of someone, and then I get a message from them, or just the other day, yes. I think I was sharing that with you in the preparation for this interview. I messaged someone on LinkedIn, and then he replied, I was just literally talking about you to my wife driving up to the mountains in the car. And so those kind of weird things that, again, you could probably somehow say, well, you posted so much on LinkedIn, and that's why he was thinking. Like, you can always, if you are the linear person, you're always going to find some kind of excuse or kind of mathematical reasoning. But I agree, you could also put this under the frequency kind of pillar. So
you're trying to rationalize it. But what's so funny is what you just said to me was the very next line that the person said, like someone calling you just as you're about to call them.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Just what are the mathematical odds of that happening? What is tethering you to that other person that makes you go, oh, I'm thinking of them, I'm going to call them.
Right.
So there's a fourth one, which is a little more scientific. and it's called RAS, R-A-S. So it's the reticular activating system. And this is actually a bundle of nerves. It's at the bottom of the brain, and it acts as like a gatekeeper. It's filtering the vast amount of information that's coming in. And it decides, based on what we're thinking about, what to actually serve our conscious, so that we can actually think consciously about it. So some of those comments that I heard that fit maybe under this category is whatever we think about, we tell our subconscious to point out more of these supporting data points.
Right.
Right? Because now we're aware of it. And another person said, it's like when you decide to buy a certain color car, all of a sudden you start noticing that color car everywhere. Well, that's because your RAS filter is now engaged, and it's serving up what you had made a point of paying attention to. Right. So there's this, this filter that's happening because the data that we have in coming, through our five senses can be, there's just millions of bits of data at any second. And our conscious brain, our awake brain, there's no way we can process all of that. So the subconscious does this filtering based on what it sees we are spending our time thinking about, whether that's a mindset or it's topics. It's suddenly giving the subconscious a filter to serve up some stuff for us to start thinking about.
I love that concept also for marketing. I talk about it in the book.
Yeah.
This idea of addressing our clients' problems. I say, obviously, we don't want to make them feel bad in gentle marketing. We don't want to only talk about the client's problem and kind of really describe how bad a situation they find themselves in, but we still need to address it because that triggers the reticular activating system in the client, and they recognize that we are talking about a problem that they have, and therefore it filters us out. Like we are now, top and center because they're like, oh, she knows my problem and she can help me solve it. So I definitely think that applies. Even in marketing, and it definitely applies also with these serendipity moments.
They're just so fascinating, and especially if you try to wrap a logic around them. And many of them you can't really do that too. And in fact, the very last one is what I would say defined as a responsive and guiding universe. And this is that there's something at work behind these occurrences. And it's sending us clues in real time, trying to get our attention for some reason. So there's something to take note of. So some of the comments that I got under this category they're just fascinating. We each get to filter it out, whatever the universe is trying to tell us to do. The universe is sentient, and it has a calibrated, careful set of learning opportunities for each of us. Now, another person said, somehow these occurrences are confirming that I'm on the right path. Mm-hmm. Another said, our intuition or our psychic ability shows us signs or omens as sacred messages being communicated from the universe. Another said, maybe it's the language of the universe as symbols, and our intuition is the filtering translator. Another said, the sleeping mind gets warnings from dreams, so why not the waking world? I thought that was kind of an interesting one.
Mm-hmm. When you bring in the dreams in there too.
So we're getting this guidance, whether we're in sleep or the waking world, either world. We're constantly getting these little messages. And that one said, I have had the feeling that the universe or this deity is sending me a message to try to learn or take a new direction. It's subtle and it's hard to explain. And then the last example was, it's an outcome from an event that's beneficial to one or both people involved. So I think that divine providence helped set it up. So you can see the interpretations just run the gamut. It's just such an interesting question. And I think questions are just magical anyway, right? They're the doorway into fantastic stories and places that we just had no comprehension of until we start taking that journey and getting drawn into those stories. But so I mean, regardless of which camp, I mean, they're just big, juicy questions that really led us into, kind of new territory. And some people love this freshness. And then others it's a little fearful. So you have to kind of be aware when to use big questions and when maybe not to just yet, because they can be challenging. As you saw, some of this gets kind of to the core of people.
It makes them really take the time to go deep within and reflect. And so, that is sometimes a scary place to go, inward rather than always being kind of outward oriented. But yes, I have a friend, Steve Morris, who has this tradition of asking beautiful questions, how he calls them. And it's so true. It's so rewarding to have these conversations around beautiful questions.
Yeah.
He was on the podcast a while ago as well. I think what everybody is now curious, the listeners are curious. So how does this relate to business? Like, how do these coincidences or serendipity moments kind of relate to business or us being heart-centered entrepreneurs? What's your reflection there?
Well, I think, we're encouraged to always weigh the pros and the cons in a business context. That's kind of the default. And we use that weighing to make the decision. And I don't know that fits everyone. I think it fits a lot of people, but I don't know that it fits everyone. Personally, I like to, sort of sit and spend time with decisions, because I figure if I keep coming back to it and I still feel the same way, I'm starting to feel more reinforced that that's a good choice for me. If I come back to the thought and I'm not so sure about this, if I keep having a sense of hesitation, I probably won't make an act on it. So I think we're used to dealing with head-based decisions, but they do not take into account our values and our intuitive side. For example, there's times where I can make what appears to be an almost instant decision because intuitively I know that it's aligned. So it's almost like I've done the weighing up process beforehand and maybe not even consciously realizing it. So when the opportunity poses itself, I'm comfortable making a big decision because I've done some of that legwork, if you will, beforehand. So I think maybe that boils down to how well you know yourself and how trustworthy your instincts, perhaps, and your intuition prove to be over time. Because if you make a decision out of haste just to have a decision made, you might not be making it based really on your internal supporting facts. So it's everybody has their own sort of checks and balances, but I think it's worth entertaining the idea of using your intuition more to be a guide, because your intuition is your alignment. Yeah. So if you're not factoring that into your decisions, are you really following your own path, or are you following something that's been prescribed that you've done without really thinking there's perhaps better ways that maybe suit you, that are based with this internal alignment? Then it's like you never really make a wrong decision. You always know that you've done the right thing. It's that little voice, listening to that little voice. Well, it's there for a reason.
I love that. And I think it applies to us as entrepreneurs and consumers of other people's services and content and what we're buying, and really, yeah, listening to our intuition to make these buying decisions.
Yes.
Then that also means that it applies for our clients, our potential clients. And so it's up to us to be aware that more and more, as we're going into the intuition age, as my friend Penny Pierce likes to call it, more and more the conscious client is going to also use her intuition when making a buying decision. So it's no longer enough to just, list facts and figures. It's
Yes.
really
Yeah.
also time to kind of play with a little magic, or I love that word awe in English. It doesn't exist in my mother tongue German or even
Yeah.
French. I don't find a good translation, and this word awe is just, that's exactly, I think, the kind of experiences that the conscious clients wants to live, right? It's this
Yes.
kind of magical experience that he can't really explain himself completely. And yet that's where the buying decision happens, because it's like, it's just this internal knowing, yes, I want to work with this person and no one else.
Yeah. It's trusting that little inner voice. And it's very feminine. I mean, looking at the facts and the figures, that to me feels very masculine, very linear. And I think women are more open to things that are not quite so evidence-based. We've learned to trust our intuition.
Right.
And the more we do it, the more reinforced it is that we can trust it. We don't see that we've made these massive, decisions that we regret. There's if you're making the decision in alignment, how can that not be the right choice?
Right. And I would add to that, it's feminine energy. It has nothing to do with male or female. We all have these different energies. It's just that women are more used to tapping into our intuition. It's, there's no coincidence that we call it female intuition.
That's right.
Thing.
That's right.
So it's just becoming, as a man, paying more attention to that part, to that kind of energy.
Yeah. And they perhaps don't have quite the luxury of doing so. Women are so much more open to being vulnerable, where, it's a little bit more risky for a man to say, well, I made this decision based on my intuition that might not go down so well, with coworkers and such. But I think a woman could say that, and it would be more accepted because it's attributed to a feminine nature, like you said.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I love those 5 different,
like a camp or an umbrella.
Camps, you call them. So it was just really fascinating. And I can't say with, 100% certainty in which camp I fall. I think it really depends on the situation.
Yeah.
Like, I want to tell another story of, I was on a walk with my friend, and on the way, like, we walked about for an hour, a half hour there and then half hour back. And on the way, she dropped a packet of tissues, and she didn't notice. And so the way back, all of a sudden she touches her ear, or maybe I saw it, that her earring was gone. And she's like, oh yeah, I noticed that I lost it, but I don't know where I lost it, and we walked too far. There's no way we're going to find it again. And then we keep walking, and then all of a sudden on the floor, there's her packet of tissues on the floor. She's like, oh, look at that. I lost those too. And so she picks them up, and then I'm like, well, let's still, at least look on the floor if we don't find this earring by any chance. Sure enough, like 2 meters from there, I'm like, there's your earring.
Oh, wow.
And so
Amazing.
We were just like, we were in awe, because obviously to us, it's like the tissues led us to the earring, and it was just so,
it's all connected.
So fascinating. Yeah.
It's all connected.
It's all connected. Yeah. That was a beautiful example.
That's a great story.
Yeah. And so for that example, you see, I don't know which camp it would fall under. Probably something to do with the frequency, somewhere in there. Or I wouldn't say, oh, this is, some kind of divine plan. I don't think that had to do with divine planning, but some kind of frequencies that led us back to that earring. I don't know, but yeah, I find it fascinating to think about these things.
I mean, they're bottomless questions. They're bottomless topics that, big thinkers, we live for this. We relish these. They take us into places that we just had no idea even existed. So, we as creatives, we love to be outside the box. We know what the box contains. We know all about that and how rigid it is. And we know where it ends and where it begins. But outside of that, it's the new frontier, right? That's where all the innovations happen and the magic. It's where the magic happens.
Exactly. So I think the invitation is really to invite listeners to pay more attention, to be more aware of these little moments, serendipity moments. And you created this beautiful worksheet where people can kind of take note and really maybe also, think of which of the 5 camps it falls under. So I'm going to make sure that we put that in the show notes. Do you have a specific link, or do I just put it in the show notes?
I do have a link, and I can send that to you. And it's a simple worksheet for any listeners who want to explore this a little bit more, because it really is a fascinating topic, and how perhaps that relates to the things that are coming into your sphere, coming into your world. It's just a simple worksheet that I use that helps me kind of break down or at least log some of the things that are coming up for me. They might be repetitive images, or they're phrases perhaps, or names or numbers. It's just a way to kind of put everything in one place and decide what meaning do I want to attribute to this, if any. I mean, you get to pick. So I'm happy to give that worksheet, and with my heartfelt compliments. And I would love to hear where it takes people.
Yeah, I think it would be really interesting to check back in and have gentle marketers kind of share, all these stories. Wouldn't that be a great kind of,
oh my goch, that could almost
have, or something like that? And
that could almost be another book.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Intuitive business.
Exactly. Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing those stories with us, Tracey. It's been an absolute delight to talk to you about these, and we'll have to do it again. We'll come up with another beautiful question.
Let's do. I would love that. I mean, I live for these moments where we just can go down these wonderful rabbit holes. And, and the beautiful thing is, it's going together. It's not just a one-sided, trip. It's
That's true, because then you can share your different views on it. If you're just by yourself, you have only your own view. But what's fascinating is that, there are 5 different camps. Imagine like so many different ideas to come.
Well, there may be more, but that to me, I thought if I can just sort of limit this to 5, then I'm able to kind of, wrap my head around, because it's a little esoteric, it's a little abstract. So, so again, people who are not comfortable with abstract thinking, they're perhaps not going to know even how to enter this. In fact, one of the ladies that gave me one of the comments, she said about her husband, she said, "Oh, he just can't go there."
Right.
Well, he's a very technical IT person. So this is the other end of that spectrum. Mm-hmm. So it didn't surprise me at all that, he wasn't able to even entertain this idea or this question. So it's a great one to use when you're with people who, relish new rabbit holes.
It's wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. I'll make sure to put that link in the show notes, as well as all your other links, your website and social media, so people can maybe share directly with you all their beautiful stories.
I would love that. There's no such thing as too many stories. It's truly what we live for. It really is. And I thank you for sharing this time with me and sharing your coincidences, because we're all just so connected. We just need to stop for a moment and we'll realize it.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here, Tracey.
My absolute pleasure. Thanks, Sarah.
I truly hope you enjoyed this conversation and got some inspiration to listen more to your intuition in 2021. Please check out Tracey's website at mastersmalltalk.com and check the show notes at sarahsinacroce.com/GBR67 to grab her intuitive guide. I really recommend it. It's beautiful, and it's going to help you kind of get into that habit of listening to those serendipitous moments. On Wednesday, I'm posting a final update about my Kickstarter campaign, which, by the way, you can still join at sarahsinacroce.com/Kickstarter in order to be among the first to read the book and get invited to the book birthing party. Also, if your intuition tells you that now is the time to join the Gentle Business Circle, our monthly explorations of gentle marketing, then don't miss the special Kickstarter offer where you can become a circle member for a whole year for only $90 and get the book for free. Our first circle call actually is coming up just in a few days on January 13th, and there's now a good 20 plus people in our little gentle marketer group. The Kickstarter ends on January 5th, so if now feels like the right time to join us, why not take advantage of this offer? Again, the link is sarahsinacroce.com/Kickstarter. Next Friday, I'm talking to Angela Perger about Ayurveda and eating like you love yourself. Let's be the change we want to see in the world. Speak soon.